Now, Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen says he believes there is still room to negotiate with the US following a 30% tariff announcement as South Africa's agriculture exports face a potential crisis. Many believe President Donald Trump's move will likely cost the country billions and, of course, deal a severe blow to the farming sector as well. Newzroom Afrika's Nasiphi was at that briefing and she joins us now live. Nasiphi, so John Steenhuisen talked about the first standalone agriculture budget vote. He talked about a whole range of other issues in terms of preparedness for disasters, climate change, food security at home. But trade, he says, is also very important. And that's, I suppose, where the important issue of that 30% tariff hike comes in.
That's indeed true, Michelle. We were at the post-budget media briefing by Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen, highlighting the strides they've made in the Department of Agriculture and where they see, or rather where they're looking to take the department. However, this particular briefing comes at the backdrop of that announcement, news coming out of Washington of a 30% tariff hike, which will obviously impact a number of industries. And I am joined by Minister Steenhuisen now, who will be talking to us. 30% tariff increase at the backdrop of your budget speech today. How will it impact the agricultural sector?
Well, obviously, it's going to cause widespread concern in the sector. Although the US accounts for around 4 to 6% of our trade on agri, in the global trade context, it's heavily concentrated in areas like citrus, wine, nuts, and table grapes. And so it's very, very important that we do whatever we can between now and the end of the month to prevent this. Look, I'm very glad that we did end up with the tariffs being implemented on the 9th of July, as we were promised. And I think what the Trump administration is doing is signaling that there is still room for negotiation to take place. Why you would extend it? Otherwise, if you wanted to implement it immediately, it would just be implemented tomorrow as per the original letters that we received. So I think it has bought us a bit of time, but now we must as a government act with urgency to make sure that we are able to put on the table something that will be acceptable and palatable to one of our largest trading partners if we're to retain market access there in a fair, open way. This obviously has devastating consequences for manufacturing, for textiles, but also in those particular agri sectors as well. We would be looking to rather expand our agri offering into the United States. These tariffs would make it incredibly difficult to get South African products to compete against other countries who perhaps are not going to be slapped with these tariffs.
Looking at the visit to Washington, various members of the cabinet had those conversations with the US President Donald Trump, including the business sector and other legislators. What was the conversation there, 90 days ago? And what do you think has changed in these 90 days? Were there also counter proposals that were presented to the US?
Yes, so obviously when we went to Washington, we had gone in with a trade package and deal. The officials then had told us that they didn't regard it as ambitious enough. What America's essentially done is taken everyone's balance of trade with them and then compared it to your balance of trade with China, the European Union, and the UK, and then obviously going through line item by line item and picking out areas that they regard as disparities. And this was a large feature of the discussion that they had. Obviously, we've done our best in the agriculture department to remove trade irritants. For instance, they were very concerned about our approach to avian flu from the US market. We've implemented a self-lift, self-ban, which was working now in a number of the states. We've sorted out some of the issues they had with blueberries. And we're obviously working hard to try, through our agricultural attaché that we've posted now to Washington, to try and remove some of these impediments. However, it looks like there are some big sticking points on automotive tariffs and heavy machinery tariffs and the like, which appear to remain a concern from the US side. So obviously what we'd need to do is to try and look at, and obviously under the lead of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, to ensure that we can try and, before the end of the month, get some deal on the table with the US to try and head off these 30% tariffs, because it'll be devastating for far too many sectors in South Africa and in a country that already has far too many unemployed South Africans.
What conversations are you having with the sector now? I mean, with these news on the table and also expectations?
Well, obviously, there's widespread concern in the sector. The citrus industry, for instance, is busy harvesting at the moment and packaging for export. And there's a lot of unanswered questions. Will the tariff apply to goods that are already on the water? Would it apply for goods that have left already? Would it apply to goods that already arrived? All of these things remain uncertain. So obviously what the industry is looking for and the sectors are looking for is some form of certainty on the way forward. And it's difficult to provide it in the absence of actually understanding exactly what it is that the US wants from South Africa in terms of the trade deals. We will continue to engage as the Agriculture Department with our US counterparts. We will continue to work with Minister Tao and his department to assist where we can to try and get through this particular impasse. But I think we've got to now use these next a couple of weeks before the end of the month to do something and to do it quickly to prevent a potential jobs crisis.
When last were you in contact with your US counterparts, and what discussions and conversations are you having, and were you taken by surprise with this announcement?
I was taken a bit by surprise by this announcement. I thought that we had made some progress and that we were in the midst of negotiations and that would have averted a letter being sent. But I do take some comfort in the fact that we weren't slapped with the tariff on the 9th of July when it was supposed to be implemented, which, as I said, is a good signal that there is room to do a deal still. And obviously we've got to do everything we can to do that. I've got a permanent attaché now in Washington. He arrived in February, specifically to deal with problems relating to agriculture and some of the trade irritations and problems that had arisen. He's in daily contact with counterparts there, with the sector there. Also, our sector are in daily contact with their suppliers and the people they're supplying into in the US as well, trying to get some sense out of what this means and what the impact is going to be. But as I said, all of this is background. What we need to do now is focus on getting a deal on the table, I believe, that is going to be palatable to one of our largest trading partners, and to get this thing done and dusted and sealed before the end of the month. If we end up with 30% tariffs on goods, certainly in the agri space in the US, it's going to make us very extremely uncompetitive in those markets. And particularly if our competitor markets are only being tariffed at 10%, it obviously means that our goods are already going to be much higher priced on arrival, never mind before they've even got onto the shelves.
For somebody sitting at home making the argument that why is the minister or government not looking at new market routes, what do you have to say in that regard?
Well, we are looking at new market routes. We're looking at two strategies in the department. One, deepening and widening existing agreements we have with a number of countries like the EU, the UK, Japan, and other countries, China, looking at deepening and widening those. But I think people need to understand that to negotiate a trade protocol, particularly when you're talking about animal products or fruits and vegetables, it requires very extensive phytosanitary or biosecurity protocols to be negotiated between the scientists and veterinarians and botanists from both countries. And that can sometimes take upwards of a year, 2 years, 3 years to get signed. So while it is a strategy, it's not going to resolve the issue in the first, in this instant. You're not suddenly going to be able to redirect citrus coming from citrus dull to Japan or China, you without causing disruptions on those markets. So people need to understand at home it does take a bit of time to negotiate new markets, but we're actively out there working Japan, the Middle East, the Far East, the Near East, and Africa as big opportunities, we believe, to expand agricultural exports.
And with this minor hurdle and the budget that you presented to Parliament, where do you see the department in the coming year?
Well, I think the department's got to play a facilitating role to help the agricultural sector flourish. And we've done that through 7 key priorities that we've identified. Chief amongst these is building partnerships in the sector. Agriculture is very lucky to have a very well-organized infrastructure, and our agriculture and agro-processing master plan brings the sector together in value chain roundtables, and we're going to continue to work to nurture and grow and create an enabling environment to create jobs and help grow the economy.
Thank you so much, Minister of Agriculture there, John Steenhuisen, following that press briefing, giving us an update so far as the 30% sweep when it comes to the tariff hike and the announcement from the U.S. President Donald Trump.